Welcome to Soul Chats, the podcast where I delve into the depth of human experience and explore what it is to be a human as we embark on a journey of self-discovery, reflection, and meaningful conversations that truly nourish the spirit. From profound insights to heartwarming stories, each episode is truly a sanctuary for your soul. Get ready to be inspired and connect with the essence of who we truly are. This is Soul Chats. So one of the things I love most about having a podcast is I get to invite people on the podcast that I want to chat to, that I want to get to know a bit more. And this was one of those. Webb is a really inspiring person. I've always got a bit of a feeling about people, and there was an energy about her that I knew I was going to like, and I really did, and you will too. This was a dynamic conversation, and we really were on the same page as far as the vision we have for the future. And Jo has a website called The Happiness Hustler. So that gives you an idea about which direction her work will take you. She's a podcast host. She's a personal trainer. She's a mother. She's from Liverpool. So all of these things, she's just a fun, inspiring, energetic person. So I know that you will enjoy this chat as much as I did. Another inspiring chat with an amazing soul.
And it was all stories of inspiration. Like basically showing people how to live a good life. So that we interviewed people like Jane Weeks, who lost her triplets in the Doha fire.
Oh, yes.
Mark Mandina, who became quadriplegic after a really simple surf accident in like this much water with his boys at the very last day of summer. These people who've been through such tragedy and adversity, but were still able to like live an amazing life, because there's so many people out there who, and it's not a comparison because this is all the work I do, but there's so many people who haven't been through that amount of heartache or travesty, but they still just don't seem to want to be able to live,
Yeah,
so
it's very
like just helping people.
Absolutely. And actually I put a few posts up this week, and when you go for a run and you get the best ideas, so I had this really good one as well, because it was relating to what I was talking about with someone yesterday. And it is those things, it's getting perspective, because when our life, it's actually, I heard it somewhere the other day, being comfortable is the worst place to be, because you're just kind of just okay, and you're kind of comfortable, but it's so comfortable that it's easy to be critical of the things that are not amazing, but you forget how amazing it is compared to how shitty it could be. And so it's that sort of in-between place that is like, well, actually, you got to push that boundary a little bit so that you actually live.
Absolutely, you're right. And I was listening to I think his name's Chris Wicks, a guy who's got an amazing podcast, and that's what he says comfort, nobody gets anywhere from being comfortable. And it's true, isn't it? Like that's why a lot of people have to hit rock bottom before they go and make a change, because they were too comfortable, and even in their discomfort they were comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. So anyway, so that's good. So that's sort of the inspiration, or that's the intention of this podcast, letting people know about amazing people out there who are doing amazing things and how they got there. And the other thing I really like is quite often people see people like yourself and myself, and that we're having really great lives. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm flying around first class everywhere and blah, blah, blah. It just means I am having an amazing life because I choose it. And I think that's the thing that people, it's worth seeing and listening to these sort of conversations, so that people can go, it hasn't always been like that. And in the end, they chose it. And that's, so I'd love to hear, and I do a proper intro and edit and stuff. So I don't worry about the intro. but I would love to know a little bit more, first of all, about, a nice place to start might actually be where you are now, like who you are now, from the perspective of I'm this person and this is how I got here, sort of thing,
Totally.
Yeah.
Who am I now? I am a person who knows who I am, understands who I am, understands my flaws, understands my makeup, And I love life every day. You know, I love what I do. And if I don't love what I do, it feels icky, I change it. Um, yeah, and I think getting to know myself was such a huge thing because I think a lot of us don't go down that path of getting to know ourselves, but I know myself really well. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
What would you say that means? Because I know what you mean, and I know I'm also a seeker, and I'm sure that's how you got to know yourself because you've always probably been a seeker. But I wonder for people who haven't necessarily had that calling to do that, they may, some people may think knowing yourself is I am this old, I am this age, and this person, and this gender, and this profession. What do you refer to when you say knowing yourself?
I think it's being in line with my soul. You know, we are human, and that's very much to be honored. And there's so much about this humanness, which is fabulous. But also, we've got this, we've got this beating heart, we've got this soul, and really understanding what our soul needs and what our soul requires and what our soul is dreaming to do in the world. I think, we get born into this world and it's very patriarchal, it's very institutionalized. We go to school, we get beliefs put on us, we get conditioned right from the word go. And I think it's unraveling all of that and really just getting back into a line with our soul. And that to me is always indicated by joy
Mm,
or the lack of joy.
mm,
So I've got to the point in my life where I can feel joy even in the midst of a crisis. I can feel happiness even in the midst of a crisis because I know, it's okay. We're here for this journey, da 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 da. But when I feel a lack of joy, I know my soul is totally out of alignment. Like, I
mm,
don't believe we're here just for giggles all the time. I don't believe that's what it's supposed to be at all. That's not what I'm saying. Like, life can be hard, life can be unfair, but it's how we view it. It's always about our perception of how we are looking out into that. If we
mm.
look at it being unfair and, oh, I'm a victim, well, that's how it's going to be. But it's finding the joy within ourselves. And I don't know about you, but as I've got older, I'm 46 now. If we want to put a hat and a label on who we are and what we are, I'm 46. Um, I I've realized joy is usually in the most simplistic of things, the
Mm.
things that we often take for granted.
And I like what you said because it's quite a thing to kind of point out that joy is not necessarily giggles and like you just said, that's not necessarily joy. Joy doesn't need to be expressed in that way. That's not how we identify, oh, I must be joyful because I'm laughing all the time,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So that's beautiful. And when you say the simple things, like how would you describe where's the last time in the last, say, 24 hours that you gone, I'm really joyful in this moment?
Like lying in my bed. I love my bed. It brings me so much joy watching the sun come up, taking my dog for a walk and watching how goofy he is. Watching one of the kids smile, watching them even get their lunch prepared for school, knowing that they're independent. That brings me joy. Having chats like this brings me joy. Collaborating with people, there's so much to be joyous about. And even like walking in the rain, early at 1 minute it was rain and next minute the sun came out, and just watching the skies change, it's also joyful. But
Mm.
joy for me as well is aligned with peace. When my heart feels peaceful, I can definitely experience more joy. And I don't think people really understand, unless you've been along this journey, I don't really think people understand how much peace we can actually have in our heart as well.
So you said before that you've gotten to a point where even in challenging times you can be in joy. How did you, because that is something I think people may go, well, that's nice for you because you've obviously got a nice life, but my life is not joyful. So, what would be something that would support that experience of joy in challenging times?
Well, I'm just going to do my disclaimer here. My life isn't all joyful. If you want to write it down on paper, my life on paper now looks very much harder at times than my life did once upon a time. Once upon a time I was married, had my 4 kids, owned my own home, was able to buy a new car, was able to go on holiday. All that seems very, very twee and lovely. And it was, at times it was lovely, at times it really wasn't. I don't own my own home. Life can be really difficult. I've got children who have mental health issues. I don't live in the same continent as my family. There's a lot of going on, and much more, which I don't need to talk about. But life is always going to be hard. And last year, for instance, I was in hospital with one of my children who was going through a really hard time, and I had to hear the most horrific things, how they were feeling, going through all these tests. And I was able to just stay at this high frequency. Like, don't get me wrong, I wasn't rolling around laughing my head off. It wasn't, but neither did I partner with worry. Neither did I go into catastrophizing the situation. I've learned skills. I've learned to find a peaceful place of harmony and balance within myself, to look at situations and to cope with them as they are happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then within that, my child, we give to our children what we have as well. We are their biggest role models. We ended up laughing with the doctors. Again, it's not always joyful. I've been in the middle of a family court scenario, which is horrific. And in the end, we've all been laughing in court, because you have to have these moments.
And so when you talk about, like you say, there's no need to get into any details, but you obviously didn't come from New Zealand. We're in New Zealand. So what brought you here, and what were some of the big experiences and learnings, as far as qualifications even, that supported you to get to this point, relating that in the sense that, okay, sometimes it's really powerful. We look back and go, oh, this all makes sense. I can see now how that course or that career choice or that decision in life led to this, led to that, led to this. And that's how I got here. And these are some of the journeys. So what was that path for you?
Well, I came over here 17 years ago with my first husband, and I had 3 children at the time. We had our 4th one here. And at that time, I was just a young person. I wasn't even 30 by the time I arrived. And, 30 with 3 young kids, another one on the way. And I was always a person searching for love, but also searching for my worth, which I had not. And that had stemmed from childhood, the stories we are told, the conditioning that are put on us, the beliefs, and also maybe our parents not being able to do the things that we needed. And not that they did anything wrong. My parents are lovely, but my dad is not he doesn't have emotional wisdom. He wasn't there for us, has never really been that father figure at all. I've been his parent since I was 12. My mum didn't give me hugs after I was 4 when my sister arrived and I went to school. She's just not a demonstrative person. Physical touch is my primary love language. So I grew up not feeling 100% loved. And then, there you are striving through life. Became an accountant really young, did all this night school, had a really good career, had my children, come here. And something just always felt amiss. And I always suffered from really bad mental health. I had really severe depression for 20 years, to the point where I ended up having a nervous breakdown in my early 30s. But again, my husband then, even though I took him to the psychiatrist with me, he said to me, he still declares that I have mild depression. And we went to see psychiatrists and all sorts, because I needed a professional to tell him how sick I was and how I needed some help. And really, what was I calling for? I was just calling to be loved, to be cherished, to be heard, to be seen, to be held when I just wasn't feeling great. And I think that's the problem with a lot of the world. We don't feel safe. We don't have our safety and security. And I flail through life, but always with a brave face on and putting this outside demeanor onto the world. So most people didn't know I was crumbling and dying inside. And I look back now and I'm heartbroken by that, because that's who I was bringing up. I was bringing up my 4 young children in that state, which they've absorbed. They've collected all that energy. They now have to go on their healing journey to get over that, which is sad. But that's where I was. And then I had this nervous breakdown and and then and then I decided I couldn't be with my husband anymore. Even though he was my childhood sweetheart, we'd met and we had this fairy tale romance. It just got to the point where it wasn't the right thing for me anymore. And I jumped out of the fire. I jumped out of the pan into the fire and straight got together with another man straight away. I was at my all-time lowest, hating myself, despising myself. Who's going to want to go out with me? I'm 35 years old. I've got 4 young children. I feel disgusting. I haven't undressed in front of anybody in years, that kind of stuff. And this man comes in who's truly charming and lovely. And I love you, love bombed me. Well, now I know he was a full-on narcissist. I'd never had experience of narcissism before, not to that extent. And then 5 years later, I had to leave a really, really abusive second marriage. And that was probably, it wasn't that was my rock bottom. It was within that was my rock bottom. And it was within that journey that I started to learn to love myself. And you ask about qualifications. Funnily enough, at the same time, I was training to be a personal trainer. Always been super fit. People always asked me to train them. Didn't really want to go there, understood my body. So I thought, I'll go and get the qualification the way we do. And it was within that journey that I had such a profound realization about how amazing our bodies are. All the different systems within them, our hormone system, our digestive system, our skeletal system, every single muscle and how it all comes together. And I was like, I'm a walking miracle. Literally, as we all are. And I have been hating on myself for years, for as long as I could remember. I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm disgusting. And within that qualification, it kind of brought this peace of mind, like, my body's amazing. Who am I to talk about myself in that way when I am a miracle? And so that was definitely a turning point for me. And then just deciding on a really horrific night, just deciding to learn to love myself because it had got so bad. I knew it was almost like a live or die situation without sounding too dramatic. That's literally where it was. And I thought, I've got to learn to love myself because I can't do this anymore. I cannot be hating on myself. It's not good for me and it's not good for my children. I'm going to lose them. And I was 100% committed from that moment on to learn to love myself. And hence where I am now as this self-love coach for others, relationship coach for others, because I've walked the walk, I've talked the talk, I've done it. I know what works. And here I am now able to help other people.
What would it have been like, or did you have anybody like yourself now? Because I always feel that too. I look ahead and I think about when we look at the experiences we've been through, it makes so much sense that when we do listen to soul, it's like, okay, this was the qualification. This life experience was the qualification in order to be of support, and it may not have been that particular circumstance, but it was always inevitable that this was going to be the role. And whether it was for helping people to get well in fitness or whether it was helping people through self-love and those sort of things, the supporting and helping people was probably a soul destiny. So did you have anybody supporting you the way you now support others?
Not at that time. But what I did do, we've all read a million self-help books. I'm sure everybody in our industry has. I actually read them. I absorbed them. I did them. I listened to any podcast I could, any TED talk. So no, I didn't have anybody super close like a coach at the time, but I did go and look for mentors and I sought them out and I listened and I absorbed and I listened to people like Wayne Dyer and Louise Hay. They're beautiful. And I just listened to anything I possibly could. I was like a sponge. I was taking it all in, but I wasn't just taking it in. I was embodying it. I was doing the work. I was talking to myself in a beautiful way every day and doing the work. And then eventually I did go off and get a coach to help me just because there's so much work we can do on our own. I mean, as a personal trainer, I watch people, I go for a walk, I go for a run, but really if they want to get somewhere and they don't have the knowledge themselves, they need that little bit of help to get over the line. And that's where I come in that area. Well, it's the same with coaching, it's this. a lot of it seems to be common sense. And when I talk to people like, oh, yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know that. Yeah, you might know, but are you actually doing it?
And
And
it's
so
such
they're
a good point. It's like that with the personal training, and it's like you say with coaching, it doesn't matter what it is. If you go to a spiritual teacher, if you go to a life coach, if you go to a relationship coach, a personal trainer, it doesn't matter what it is. They can give you the best advice. You can spend the best money and go to the top coach in the world. It means nothing if you don't do the work.
absolutely. And
And
I've paid for a lot of coaches, you know, over the time. And sometimes your coaching needs to change. And well, I'm going in this area, so I need that specialist. Now I'm going to go in this area. But you're right. There's some beautiful lyrics of a song. It's like, I can give you wings, but I can't help you fly. You know, you've got to do that bit yourself.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And it's a really, really good point because, especially as we know in this industry, and when we look on social media, there is a million people we could turn to for coaching of any sort. And there's a million people out there offering advice, and it is daunting for people. I mean, we're lucky when we've got the experience, the training, the application to be able to discern some of the information out there and go, okay, well, that's not actually relevant or real or whatever. However, so that's a good point too, because as you said, you listened to lots of podcasts and you read lots of books and things and you applied it, which that's number one. However, what would you say to people to be discerning in this market, in this time of like insane amount of information and so many, because it could do more harm than good because there's such conflicting and contrasting information out there as well.
I think just find somebody who you vibe with, somebody who I would look at somebody and go, would I like to hang out with them and just have a coffee with them? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
they're the type of people, they're the clients I get, the type of clients I have are it's like attracts like. I
Yeah.
like to hang out with my clients. You know, they're a pleasure to be around no matter what they're going through. And I think they feel the same about me. It's like, do you vibe with that person? Or are they really where you want them to be? And I think that's where you've got to be a little bit discerning in the coaching industry, because there is a lot of talk and, promises. I don't believe we go to any coach who can promise us anything, because we can't promise anybody
No.
anything. I can't promise my clients anything, because they are them and I am me. I can only walk the path with them and be their biggest cheerleader and want the best for them, but they've got to do the work. And that is where life is, isn't it? And I was thinking about this today, why don't people do the work? And a lot of it, I think, is because they don't actually want to address the darkest parts of themselves.
So that's a good point too, because there is a lot of talk of shadow work, and right now there's lots and lots of talk around trauma and trauma therapy and all of those sort of things. So what have you noticed working with people and doing your own work as well? Because I agree with you. And I think as we look at the world, we're kind of in this phase globally of exposing our darker side
Mm-hmm.
and facing it. So, what sort of maybe advice would you give to somebody who's how can they, like, more from the point of how can they see that they're avoiding the shadows, and what would be a way to actually let them have the courage to do it, support them?
I think it's to have a little look within and say, is there some parts of shame and guilt I am carrying? Is there some dark little pockets that you've tried to hide away of shame and guilt? And you don't even have to tell me the answer, because I know that there is.
Yeah.
I know that there is. There is in every single person. But this is where society needs to change, because why do we hide it away? We
Yeah.
hide it away because we want to fit in. We don't want to be exposed, and we don't want to be judged, and we don't want to be thrown out of the tribe. Well, if the whole world could stop doing that and we all become less judgmental, and I think that's probably a really good point to make. If you are less judgmental of others, you are less likely to receive judgment from others, or less likely to give a damn when you do. So be careful how we are when we are seeing other people in the world. If we can be less judgy, if we can be more open, if we can see people with more compassion and kindness, because at the end of the day, we've never walked in anybody else's shoes, ever. We do not know anybody else's story. So if we can be that example, then when we then go to look at our darkest part, we know that there's other people out there who can lead the way we are leading, with compassion and kindness, because we all have that darkness inside of us. And if, the things like have been, we're not allowed to talk about certain things on the internet. We're not allowed to talk about suicide openly. We're not allowed to talk about this and that. Well, these things need to be talked about. When we talk about them, we're not going to make somebody else do them. But what we are going to do is we're going to say to somebody, it's okay if you have these dark thoughts. It's okay if, I've got a friend, for instance, who has adopted children. She wanted to hand them back one time. And she found that so hard to say out loud. You know what? I've got 4 children. Sometimes I've wanted to hand them back too.
Yeah.
But are we allowed to say that as mothers? Are we allowed to say that as people? We should be allowed to say anything we want without condemnation.
And like you say, anything we want from the perspective of speaking our inner experience. And I think that's a huge difference between when we say, we're trying to regulate speech because of hate speech and things like that. What we're really saying from that perspective is what we would possibly be in agreement with is judgment and all that. However, it's not about just regulating speech, because speaking from my internal experience of like sharing that I'm having suicidal thoughts, or sharing that I want to give these adoptive children away, or sharing that I'm struggling with this experience is just a sharing from my personal experience. That's my internal experience expressed outwards. Yeah. And if I can't express my internal experience outwards for fear of condemnation or judgment or worse, then I can't express. And it's isn't it? And that's where I agree with you. It's such a good way to explain why people might be fearful of allowing that thought and to face that thought.
One of the biggest areas that I work in is area of expression, because also when you think about when we say that out loud, often we get our own answers. And isn't that what coaching is all about? Allowing someone a really safe space to say what the heck they want. And we don't come from a place of judgment. And then they find their own answers, because, when might say, go back to my friend, oh, I want to give my children back. Then she thinks about it. She's, of course I don't. I absolutely love them desperately. It would actually break my heart. She's got the own answers, but it's actually helped her heal by saying the words out loud. And it actually comes back to that peace in our heart, because we're carrying shame and guilt for even having the thought. Then it builds up and we try to put it down. But when we're trying to put anything down, it then gets stuck within our bodies, within our cells. And that then goes on to cause things like poor mental health, disease, and it's not healthy. Whereas if we have the freedom to just say something in a very safe environment, work through the answers ourselves, and even if it was worst case scenario, you did need to go and do something, hand them back or go and take a break or something, so be it. But we can take action steps from there. Rather than hiding it, having all of this stuff hidden within us, which is going to come out somewhere.
It's like what you were saying about the experience you had about inside you were really struggling, but you kept this mask on, and eventually the mask just can't stay on.
No. And I opened the mug drawer one day to make a cup of tea and couldn't get out of it. I was literally immobilized, sobbing like an absolute mess, and had a nervous breakdown, which I never would have thought I'd ever have, because, well, I didn't know anything about them really. But yes, it's got to come out somewhere, either illness, autoimmune disease, poor mental health,
What did if you're willing to share, a mental breakdown, like a nervous breakdown, what did that actually look like? Because I don't know if sometimes, like you say, you didn't know what that was. And maybe people are going through experiences and not realizing what's actually going on for them.
For me, the morning it happened, I mean, obviously it's not just a moment, but the overwhelm got so big. Like the chest tightening, that feeling where everything is just bearing down on you, and you're just like, I didn't know what to do next. Like, do I make the cup of tea? Do I get the children some cereal? Do I go and get brush my teeth. It was just like, but everything felt like I couldn't do any of it. And for somebody who is very, very capable and is very high energy and always on the go, always doing stuff, always looking after others, it was a very strange experience. And the emotions I was feeling, I was kind of having these manic emotions. Like sometimes I could be like laughing in hysteria, and then I'd be on the floor, like in the fetal position, sobbing. And I just couldn't regulate it. And for so long, I'd put on this mask. As I said, I'd be feeling awful. No, come on, Joanne, there's more people worse off than you in the world. Get your clothes on, get your lipstick on, get out to school, take the children. I'd be giving myself those kind of pep talks, and I'd go out to school and I'd be, oh, this radiant person. But really inside, just crushed and saying the most awful things and feeling wretched. Then the mask fell off. It was, as I say, it was from one minute to another. I didn't know if I was Arthur or Martha, if you know what I mean. I was here, there, and everything. I was a dither. I just was so lucky that my GP at the time was a GP who listened to me and took me serious. Like, didn't just poo-poo me and go, "You've got postnatal depression." It was, he listened. He said, I feel out of my depth here. I'm going to refer you on to someone. I got to see someone within a week. And I was lucky enough that I was able to pay for that myself. And I got the help I needed. I was medicated for 1.5 years, and here I am now. I was probably no way on earth I would ever go and I would medicate ever again like that. But at the time, that was where I was, and that's what I needed.
I think it's an important thing to keep in mind too, because you did need that at that time. And it's very easy for us to judge ourselves, or for others to judge people say like, oh, I need this medication at this point, because especially for those of us on a holistic lifestyle and all that sort of stuff, it's like, oh, try this, try that. At that time, that's what you needed. And so there's no judgment for yourself, plus there's no judgment from your current version of yourself for that version of yourself, because that's what that version of yourself at the time needed.
Totally. And now I look back on her and I think, oh my gosh, I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner. And I just, if I'm ever doing any of that regression work, I go back and I just love her unconditionally, because that's all she ever needed. All she ever needed for her entire life. But who did she need the most love from? She needed it from me. And that's been my biggest lesson in all of this. And I think personally, my mental health was poor, I believe, because of the internal dialogue I had with myself. Always, I don't know what standard I was trying to meet. I don't really understand what I was trying to achieve, but I was not kind to myself ever. And I never gave myself any credit. And I was very judgmental. I certainly wasn't compassionate. I certainly wasn't kind. And you go, wow, that's not a healthy way for any organism. You think of any organism in the world, we can't live like that.
No. And it's interesting the way you describe the breakdown. It just sounds like the organism short-circuiting on all levels, just complete short circuit.
I was exhausted. I was exhausted from putting on the mask, from not saying how I felt, or from saying how I felt, but nobody listening. When you've got a partner, and I don't doubt for a single second that he loved me, but he didn't have any emotional wisdom either. And so when you're standing in front of somebody going, I just need help, or I need some more love, what did he hear? He heard that he wasn't good enough. Oh, God, I'm already loving you. And so then he would go coil back, not be able to give me anything else, which all I perhaps really needed was a back rub, or can you just sit down, honey, and I'll make the dinner tonight? But people see these kind of requests as a criticism, which it certainly wasn't. I was crying out for help. So I was just exhausted. We get exhausted in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the idea of self-love in itself is interesting, because we have set up a society that doesn't necessarily function well at the moment it would function well. It's a dysfunctional society
Mhm.
because we don't encourage self-love. Because say if you prioritized yourself, and I mean, there are people out there who do it. I've got people in my world that I know that are very, very self-sufficient, and I'm sure you've experienced it in your journey as I have in mine, that the people around you and around people who are self-fulfilled, if they're not on that journey and in that understanding, it's very challenging because we don't even see the subtle play that is going on of like all these broken people having this unspoken and subconscious or unconscious agreement of needs met that aren't being met because we're not meeting our own needs. We're not whole. And so there is this dynamic that goes on between everybody in society, everybody. And so then if you're completely whole, you're breaking the agreement. You're breaking the backwards and forwards. So now you don't need me to play my role in your life. So then you're not playing your role in my life. So now I'm left standing here playing this game by myself, or I have to play it with the other broken people when, oh, you've changed, and all of those sort of things. So there is almost, and I mentioned it before, there is definitely an element of bravery needed to go on the journey of seeing your shadows and truly loving yourself, and then being willing enough to walk around the world being whole and loving yourself.
Yeah, I agree. I believe it's a totally courageous journey. And I believe it's a courageous journey that every woman can go on. If she is to take up the challenge, which is obviously my mission in life, to help people do that, because it's such a potent thing to do and it changes your life. Like it's every single thought, action, and decision comes from how we feel about ourselves. So if we are not whole, if we are not loving on ourselves, especially those darkest parts of ourselves, if we are not loving them, then every thought, action, and decision comes from that place of not loving ourselves. And how can every thought, action, and decision possibly be positive if we are coming from a place of not self-love? Whereas if it comes from a place of self-love, your life is going to be different. And sometimes that does mean not seeing certain people because they're not your people anymore. It does mean putting boundaries in relationships. It does mean telling that person that you have needs, and if they can't meet your needs, then that's okay. You walk away with compassion and kindness because you realize that they're just not able to do it. We no longer dim down our needs to try and fit in with a person. And you're right, it is courageous, it is brave, because all of a sudden we don't fit in. But we don't fit in anyway. We're putting on a mask to fit in. We already belong. We belong.
It comes back to the idea of the tribe, though, doesn't it? The idea of being pushed out of the tribe. And it's this evolutionary thing. And I feel like that's part of this big shift we're in, and this evolutionary shift we're in, where the tribal mentality of fear of being pushed out of the tribe, and therefore keeping the mask on or towing the line or blurring the boundaries or all those sort of things. And like you say, there is courage, and it really does feel like there is this revolution and evolution, and particularly in women, and maybe we just seeing that because we are women having experiences in that field. But there does seem to be this bravery to step out into our own journey and our own self-love, and I find it's actually less lonely.
Totally. I agree, because you can be lonely in a room full of people, can't you?
Yeah.
And I said to a beautiful young client, she's only 18. She's just gone off to university. I did a course with her a year ago. She was having this terrible time in school. And over the little 6-week thing that we did, she turned her life around, and the last year in school was super positive. She ended the year getting an award, everything she'd dreamed of and worked towards, with friends, feeling good about herself because she did the work. Anyway, she came back to me when she was going to university, just for a little top-up session. And she was worried and she was a little bit anxious, totally normal going off to university. But she had these group of people who she'd only just met, and they were kind of giving her some funny looks, and she didn't know what to do. And I said, how does it feel when you can be truly your authentic self? And she's, oh, amazing. I love it. When I can just be me and say what I want. I don't have to put any filters in the world, and I just do it. I said, okay, well, how are you feeling when you're with these people? She said, well, not very nice. I said, well, why do you want to be with them then? And she's like, absolutely. And she's right. She was feeling lonely in a room full of people because she was having to mask herself and having to second guess herself and having to think, at the end of the day, half the people in the world will love you and half the people won't. And it's as simple as that. When somebody doesn't love you, see it as a celebration. If somebody doesn't like you, see it as a celebration, because it's one less person you even have to think about. It's like, okay, well, that's fine. I let them go with love. That's fine. But I really want to be able to be authentic. As you said, it's less lonely when you're on this path because you find the people who absolutely adore the core of you, and they will speak highly of you even when you're not there. And that's important.
And from a tribal perspective, if we are to think about it that way, that is finding your tribe. It's like we've all been put into, well, not all, but often we find ourselves in the wrong tribe, and we're trying to belong to the tribe. And there's this intrinsic feeling of, okay, well, I can't leave this tribe because I'll be, I won't survive if I'm not in this tribe. And then when we have the bravery to leave and we go out into the wilderness, and I did this training once, and it was really challenging. And I remember my coach at the time was saying, through the valley of death, through the valley of death. And it kind of feels really relevant because it's like you leave this tribe of society and then you go through the valley of death and you're out in the abyss and you're finding, your own shadows and you're fighting demons. And then you come out the other end and all of a sudden you find this new tribe and you're like, this is the tribe I belong to. This is the tribe that fits. And then it's easy, and there is this authenticity, and you're seen and you're celebrated, and everybody is. There isn't because that's also, I think, an interesting thing is the way we've previously, this life we've lived, where we've tried to fit in with tribes we're not meant to be with. We also fight for recognition because we're not accepting. And so we fight for recognition. So we're creating these false goals and these false achievements, and we achieve them, but they just don't feel right. And so there is this okay, I've made it to the top of this tribe and I still don't feel great. And so then, but when we are in our authentic tribe and we are authentic self, there isn't any fight for the top, and there isn't any need to prove yourself with certain accolades and things like that. They just come when they are deserved, and we just celebrate each other. And it's such a different way of being. And I have this whole visual going in my head right now of this utopia that's all colorful and this, and yeah, so it does feel like that's part of this shift, part of this creation.
But that's funny you should say about the utopia, because as part of my spiritual gifts, I was given a vision of utopia, of how life can be. And it wasn't that we have to all stay in a relationship and there's no divorce and there's no friendship ending. But what it showed me was people were happy, but when their journey came to an end, there didn't have to be bitterness. There didn't have to be that awfulness that comes with the ends of friendships, relationships, even family not seeing each other. That it could just be like, okay, well, we're not that, we've walked that bit of the journey together. Now it's time to go on a different journey. And I love you, I celebrate you, goodbye. And it was almost like that was the vision I was given, and it was so beautiful. And I remember sitting there because I'm not really a seer, and it was given to me so vividly. And I was like, wow, that is the world I am striving for now.
Yes.
And when I work with clients, one of the biggest things they notice in their life is their relationships get better. They have better relationships, more heart-centered, more aligned, more authentic. And some relationships end, some relationships they work on to get better. And I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. I might be talking about relationships with their parents, with their siblings, with their friends, with their colleagues. It's one of the biggest things that they notice when they do this work. The how they are seen and how they are perceived by others and how they perceive others changes, and their relationships just flourish. And that's just beautiful because we are here for love and connection.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So on that note, what's your star sign?
I'm a Cancerian.
Okay. All right. Nice. That's an emotional sign as well. Not that I'm hugely into star sign, but it's always quite interesting to are you into human design?
Oh, I love human design. I'm a manifester.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'm a manifesting generator. So yeah, still learning all of that as well.
Well, that's usually when you talk about paying for a coach and stuff. I've had a coach in human design over the last couple of years because I've just been so fascinated by it. I've been absorbing all of that information. It makes total sense. It helps clients see things. And, I'm certainly not a human design expert, but I put them onto the people who are. And I've had a coach help me through that and see where I am in business and, what if I'm on the right path. And that's been amazing for me. It's been it's been like one of those revelations. It's awesome. And you really start to understand yourself. And every single gate I have, I realize I've done the work for that gate to be really solid now. And it's really soul confirming.
Yeah, beautiful. I work with the soul master keys and it's different, but again, it's reading the soul blueprint. And that's the key, isn't it? It's understanding the soul blueprint and understanding that when we live in alignment with soul and soul blueprint, that's the difference of living in alignment, right? And then using the avatar, the human, to experience and express that soul blueprint. Whereas I think where a lot of what the drama has been, or in many people's lives, it's they forget about the blueprint. They're living out of alignment, and they're just living with the whims of the avatar, of the human, and of the conditioning. So yeah, amazing. So what are some offerings that you have? Like, what are some ways that people work with you?
I've got an online course called The Goddess Awakening, which is just a 4-week online course. It's like my evergreen one, but it's beautiful. It goes through, the divine feminine energy, getting to know who you are, feeling to heal, forgiveness, and then goes into manifestation. So it just takes you on a beautiful 4-week journey, usually with the moon cycle, start on a new moon, have the full moon in the middle. And then, and then coming back into your new moon at the end, which is so beautiful to really set intentions and solidify some of the, the information you've gathered and some of the healing you've done along the way. And then I've got my one-to-one coaching where I love my one-to-ones. And I'm currently just also working on a collaboration called the Radiance Revolution, which is our podcast with 2 other amazing wise women, Melly and Bridget. So we're just doing that. We're going to start a membership platform soon with that as well. So lots in the pipeline, which is awesome.
It's so good. And this is all part of it. This is the whole part of the utopia, is supporting people. There's so many of us out there supporting people to have access to what does it look like to recalibrate the system, and what does it look like to find that bravery, and where do I get the support, and what is the vision of where I'm going to while they're walking through the valley of death,
Yeah, totally.
to sort of like be a beacon of light and go, keep coming in this direction and we'll support you on the way. And so amazing. And I'm so grateful you're out there doing that work. And, we're out here in this utopic experience and greeting and welcoming all the new people as they arrive.
I know. It's amazing. I love it. And don't you just love life? Life is just lovely. I love it. And that's the biggest joy to me, that I can wake up every day and go, I love life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually said a post the other day about, if this was my last day, I can honestly say I've had a successful life. And I haven't ticked all the boxes at all. However, I'm glad that there's so much more I want to experience and do and achieve and all that sort of stuff and be part of. And I've had an amazing life because of the fact, like you say, because every single day is seeing my dogs play and seeing your kids make lunches and doing all the things, is like, that's a successful life. You showed up and you lived that day fully, and amazing.
I agree. Totally. 100%.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I know it's going to be very inspiring for those who are listening. And I will put all the links here so that people can find you, because it sounds like you're doing just the most amazing work. And I know that you'd be an amazing, amazing coach to work with. So thank you for being you.
Thank you so much for your time. Mwah.